I guess maybe the first thing we should do is start with the album. I guess the question that is on most people's minds is why did you decide to record as Tom Petty and not Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers?
Well, I'd done this album, you know, I'd started recording without them because they weren't around, and I'd just written some songs with Jeff Lynne, and we went over to Mike Campbell's house, and we put them down with Mike and some friends. And so then, when I liked them, I was faced with either doing them over again with the Heartbreakers, which I didn't want to do, or I could have half a Heartbreakers record, which I also didn't want to do. So I thought the best way to release it would just be under my name, as me.
So this is like a solo album? Is this the way you're
Yeah, it really sort of is,
Also, Zombie Zoo, I know it's like the last track on the album, but maybe you could tell me a bit about what that's about. I mean, it may be really obvious to somebody who just listens to it, but is there a bit more going on there? Or maybe...
It's just having fun with just trying to have fun with it. But it's kind of like I guess it's a, you know, a sort of a look at part of the LA nightlife, you know, a certain segment of it. And that's what it was inspired by. It's just a joke, really. I think it probably makes some more serious connotations, but it's just a joke overall.
Yeah, because it's like, to me, it sort of told a story about basically, you know, a lot of nightlife that happens, especially in the last few years, where kids get all dressed up and like they get overdressed basically, and they go out to a club and they get assaulted with these lights and
well, that's what it's all about, you know, that sort of thing.
Okay, I guess I think there's one song called "You're So Bad." Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but is that like an anti-yuppie song? Are you talking about your sister and she marries a yuppie? Or?
Well, it's also anti-singers then. You know, then she goes out with the swinging singer, and he doesn't know if that's any better either.
Yeah.
I think it's sort of a yuppie love song.
Really?
I don't know what it is, but it's actually a very sort of dark song in a way, so it sounds so happy.
It is.
It sounds very light and bouncy when you hear it, but in truth, when you really start looking at it, it's sort of dark.
Yeah. How do you like to write usually? Do you like to write from one particular point of view? Do you write down sort of lyrics in third person, or how does that creative process work?
All different points of view, you know, first, second, and third. You know, I mainly lately I like to try and create characters for the songs. You know, even the narrators are sometimes characters in the songs, and sometimes they're more personal or more, you know, a bit more autobiographical. You know, all different ways.
There's not one way that you prefer?
No, that would be way too limiting. I like to just work in any style that pops into my head.
Would you say that the songs that you write are an accurate representation of what you are?
Oh, I don't know. It's hard to say, really. I mean, I'm not even sure what I am. I'm sure that in some ways they represent me. I don't know if I'd want to say that they completely represent me. But I did write them, so I've got to take some responsibility for them.
So you're more of a storyteller then?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's not anything I ever think about. I just do it. So it's real hard to think and put it into those terms. You know, I don't really know. Maybe. Yeah, sometimes
How do you like to write? Do you like to write while on tour, under all that pressure, or do you like to put yourself away in a room somewhere and just pick up a guitar?
Well, I can't write very well on tour anymore. I used to. In the last, 5 years, I haven't been able to do that much. I usually just write when there's a record to do. Most of the time, I know I've got to make a record, then I'll pull out the guitar or go sit at the piano on a fairly regular basis, and just so I won't show up at the studio with nothing. Though sometimes I do show up at the studio with nothing, and then I have to do it there, which is a little more tension and pressure and all that. But I never have my homework on time either.
Which records were actually written in the studio? Anything?
A lot of the last Heartbreakers one, Let Me Up, I've Had Enough. Almost all of it was written in the studio. A lot of our first album was written in the studio. I don't know, I'm just trouble recalling, really.
Of all the albums that you've released, which is your own favorite?
This one.
Really? Why is that?
Well, I don't know, maybe it's the freshest to me. It's hard to say when you put that many out exactly which one's your favorite. But I think that this one's some of the best work I've done on a consistent level from the beginning of the album to the end.
Yeah.
I feel like it's, as an album, as an LP, it's probably, one of the best anyway.
Actually, I have to agree, because I think this album is a wonderful combination of really nice, well-thought, well-planned production and the songwriting style that you're famous for. And I also thought it was really nice, because I was listening to the new album and the second album the other day, back to back, and I love the difference in textures and sounds. Like, obviously that was a very young album, the second one. I just wanted to talk about that second one, actually. What can you remember?
What can I remember about it?
Yeah, about the recording and the vibe in the studio.
You're Gonna Get It? Is that the album you're talking about? Gee, it was so long ago. I remember us doing it pretty fast. For the most part, we were trying desperately to do anything that wasn't like the first one. We've always had this kind of thing in us where we didn't want to do what we just did. I remember just being there in this little brown room with a shelter studio, and we were all there just doing strange things. There's like little toy helicopters on the tracks, and sending people down to the arcade with a cassette machine to record pinball machines and all this stuff, and then come back and take that and the sound from a baseball game and all this, and mixing it in and trying to put it subliminally in the mix. Crazy stuff, really.
So all those things are actually on the record somewhere?
Oh yeah.
I can't recall it.
You don't really hear them up front.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah,
it's just like we were just really learning about recording on that album. That was, us sort of trying to try everything and usually going wrong with it. Lots of weird tape delays and echoes. We were in a funny place because it had taken the first one nearly a year to catch on, and so we were faced with the first one was just getting popular, and there we were already making the second one. And so we really just wanted to get it done so we could go back out on tour. But I liked it, some of it. I don't know, some of the songs were good. But it was pretty wild boys in those days, really. Think about it, we were pretty wound up boys.
How did you and the Heartbreakers get together? Because this is something I know nothing about. Was it like a high school band? We all go to school?
Well, we knew each other, some of us did in school. We were out of high school when we formed. We formed in L.A., really. 3 of us had been in one band, Mike, myself, and Benmont. The other 2 were from the same town in Florida that we all moved to Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
So when we got there, our band broke up, and we found him, and we just put the band together there in '75. And we made that first album in '76.
So you come from Florida then?
Mm-hmm.
Not from St. Petersburg, right?
Oh, no. I know St. Petersburg pretty well, but I didn't come from there.
Yeah. Actually, I've just been there a couple of times. It's a pretty flat place.
It's very flat.
So, coming from Florida, I know Florida is considered to be really a part of the southern states, like Louisiana and Georgia, in terms of culture is concerned. Would you say that you were pretty well influenced by people like Leonard Skinner and all those, the good old boys from the early 70s?
They were more contemporaries than people that would influence us.
Mm-hmm.
Long before either of us had records, we would play the same dances with Leonard Skinner and those bands, you know.
Yeah.
But we were not really influenced by that. I think we were more song-oriented than they were. They were tended to do long guitar pieces, and we wanted to be songwriters, you know, like the Beatles or people of that ilk, Carole King. You know.
So
we wanted to write songs and have a group that played them.
While Leonard Skinner was killing himself doing live gigs and all that sort of thing, you were more concerned with actually the structure of the song and maybe rehearsing more?
Yeah, well, we did tons of gigs. We had to get to do anything. So we all did gigs, but the difference was, and what eventually made us move to LA really, was that there it was very much, you know, we liked all Leonard Skinner and the Allman Brothers and all those. We thought they were great, but we didn't want to do it, you know. And like the trend at the time, mid-'70s, I suppose, was to all be like that. Every single band was like that, you know. And we thought, you know, it's going to be like that. And so we went to Los Angeles.
Were you surprised when, I think it was Breakdown from the first album, that was like I don't know how big of a hit single it was in the States, but it was the song that got you recognition anyway. Were you surprised that, maybe, because you said before that it took a year for the album to take off, were you surprised at how long it took, or were you surprised that it took off at all? What were your expectations for that first record?
Oh, world conquest. And we were always, you know, out to do it. I think the first one, I was surprised. I mean, well, I'd seen it do pretty well in England when it first came out, and then sort of that drifted back to the States slowly, and then the States caught up, you know. So, you know, you're always surprised, I think. But just thrilled, really. Just thrilled.
Just happy
Happy to be here.
acknowledged.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point you brought up, was the fact that I think the first 2 albums were quite successful here around 76, 77, I think, because of the rawness. That's an interesting point you brought up, was the fact that I think the first 2 albums were quite successful here around 76, 77, I think, because of the rawness of the sound, and also because at that time punk thing was happening here, which was like a throwback to the original rock and roll attitude.
Yeah, we fit nicely into all that. But so did a lot of people. You know, it was just, it was funny at that time. It seemed like there were more and more people who were just coming out from behind the hedge, you know, that really didn't like the way music was at the time, and then slowly emerged.
Yeah, right. One thing I actually really wanted to talk about was what happened with Shelter, because Shelter was sold to MCA, right? And you didn't like that idea because that means that they would increase the cost of your albums.
No, no, no. Those were two different court battles. The first one was because we'd basically been held onto a contract that we signed when we first came to town in another group, for about a penny a record or something. We really didn't know anything about the music business. We didn't have a lawyer, we didn't have anything. We were completely duped. So when we started to pop as the Heartbreakers, they held us to this contract. So we went in and said, well, we can't have that, and then they said, okay, we'll give you a penny more, but you can't, but we want a clause, we said, so that, if you sell the company, which, because it was always being sold every week, it seemed like, that we want out. So the next thing they did was they sold the company and they used us as bait, to sell other shit. And it wasn't really Shelter as much as it was ABC Records, I think, sold out all their shit to MCA. And so, then we said we ain't going to do it. We ain't going to go along with it. And it wound up a year-long lawsuit, and which we, in the end, emerged victorious.
During that year, were you recording?
I was recording on the run. I wasn't supposed to be recording, but I was, and I was putting fake names on the boxes and hiding them from the U.S. Marshals and all that stuff.
When did you first meet Bob Dylan?
I met him first in '78.
Were you mutual fans? Or were you doing like a show together?
No, I just met him. He invited me backstage to do something at the stage, really. Yeah. I didn't see him again for a long time. The band knew him. They played with him from time to time. And that's how I got to know him, was through the Heartbreakers.
How is the idea hatched? And who thought of the idea of actually working together?
Bob. He approached us just to get through a gig, just didn't really farm it.
Right.
We were on the show. And he wanted to play with a rock group, wanted to do some electric stuff, so he approached it. It was a very natural thing, really, because I think he had three of the Heartbreakers in the studio with him at the time. So he just said, hey, how about I come along with you guys? And I said, okay.
As you started to work with Bob Dylan more and more, how did your impression of him change from when you first met him?
Oh, I don't think it's changed. Really. Other than as a person, I know him pretty well. As well as you can know Bob. But I don't have any different impressions of him as an artist. Maybe, they grew in some respect.
Do you think he's a difficult person to really get to know? Because I think a lot of people get the impression just from his records that he likes to keep a very distant from actually what he is. He likes to keep a distance away from his recorded works. Do you think that's still the same?
I don't know. You'd have to ask him all that. I really don't know.
So you can't tell me anything?
I'm not gonna tell you.
Right. Okay.
That's why we're friends.
All right. Okay. As far as the music that you made with him is concerned, let's stick with that then. How did you both approach actually making the music? Did you sit down and say
plug in?
Right.
It was honestly, we did no more than plug in and start playing. If we had something that wasn't working, we might talk about it. And Maybe you try it this way, try it that way. Don't try it at all. Just try another song. Basically, our approach, whenever we rehearsed, which was rare, but when we did, we'd just play lots and lots of songs. You know, they weren't all Bob Dylan songs, just all kinds of songs, any songs that came up. And then there was usually nothing that you played in the show. You know, when you got to the show, the whole different. I think there it was just a very spontaneous situation where you had to learn to follow Bob, which isn't the simplest thing to do. You have to be a little bit alert all the time. It was a very rewarding thing, really, musically. When you leave at the end of the night, you know, you really feel like you've been put through the paces and played some music by the time you leave. Looking back on it, it was pretty fulfilling, really, in a lot of ways.
How does that time differ with the time that you were the traveling Wilburys?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean, working with everybody else as the Wilburys, how does that compare with the time that you were with Dylan?
Well, it was a different thing altogether, because when I was with Bob, what we were trying to do basically was present Bob's material, you know, present Bob's stuff. The Wilburys was a whole other thing, you know. That was like a group where everyone wrote together and sang together, and we were trying to present an altogether different thing, you know, like the Wilburys. You know, we weren't really trying to put Bob Dylan over, or any one of us. So I'd say the biggest difference was one was a group.
Okay. As far as this album is concerned, what's the next stage? Are you going to be doing a massive tour with the Heartbreakers?
No, not a massive one. I think I'll do a brief one across the States, and then I'll go back in the studio with the Heartbreakers for the Heartbreakers album. I'm not real mad about touring anymore on a large scale. I don't want to do it for months on end anymore. Got that way out of my system now. You know, I don't mind. I like actually to perform. I'm tired of putting that. You lose too much of the year if you go out there for 6 or 7 months. You don't have any time to create anything. So my mind at the moment anyway is to do less concerts and more records. Is what I'd like to do.
There seems to be a return to a roots kind of rock and roll attitude, or not recently, but it has been going on for quite a number of years. Actually, probably never faded, actually. When you think of it.
They tell me that every year. I just never see it happen. You know?
What, I mean, return?
That we're going back to that. You know, I've always been there myself. I don't know. I hope that happens. I hope you're right about that.
Well, there will be a return to.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see people just return to playing their instruments.
Yeah, instead of relying on technology.
Yeah, that's bullshit. You know, that's really bullshit. I mean, how Europe has put up with it as long as they have is fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's really been about 10 years since.
Yeah, it's fascinating that it ever even got listened to me, but let alone that it's been a decade of that shit. You know.
There was an interesting quote from Peter Gabriel. He said he read a survey that was taken of kids or people in the States who buy records, and apparently they only, to every album they buy, on the average, they only listen to each album 1.2 hours, and then they don't listen to it.
Well, I don't know how you get a statistic like that anyway, but you know what I mean? I don't even believe that statistic, though it's probably true to some extent. I don't think you can poll the United States and have everybody tell you how many times they listen to an album. Yeah. If you want to take the large percentage of the ones made and look at them, say, generally, they're not very good. And I think to make an album, used to be, in to make an album, you had to do something pretty good to even warrant getting that much space, you know, to even be allowed to make an album. You had to do something pretty good. That's all changed. Now you got a lot of shit on records, really. You know, they don't mean the same thing because they're not very good overall. You know, so I think it would be nice to see people sort of take it just a little bit more, maybe not serious, but just a little more honestly. And let the public be a little more discerning in what they like, you know. I like rock and roll music myself, which I think, you know, is nearly extinct.
Do you really?
Yeah, I think it's nearly extinct in a contemporary setting, yes.
Yeah. That's interesting, because people like REM, who are now very big, they've been doing, you know, I consider to be good raw rock and roll for a number of years, and there's always new bands like that are coming up.
Yeah. Well, not enough though.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, the REM's good, and that's a good rock group. I think. I'm saying there's not that there's not any.
Yeah.
But on the large scale of things, it's a very small portion of the dial. You know, very small. Most of the music, if we put the radio on, that we're going to hear, and also most of it's aimed at even young people, isn't rock and roll in any form that I can tell. I wouldn't call it rock and roll music. So
you're not a big fan of heavy metal as a form of rock music?
No, not really. Well, you know, I don't want to slag all of heavy metal off.
Yeah.
Or any form of music all off. But
Yeah.
I think most of it's pretty dumb, really. You know? I mean, I'd have to be blind and deaf not to say, oh, that's stupid. You know?
I think that kind of added the direness of the pop charts is really taken hold the last few years, and I think it's more to do with like an economic kind of situation that's been happening, especially in the sort of civilized Western world, like Europe and North America.
Yeah, I just wish that people would make records that don't offend my intelligence, you know. You know, rock and roll is such a vibrant music and such a great thing. But it'd just be nice to, I mean, there probably are a lot of groups, you know, that are trying to get through, but I don't think they get listened to or get the exposure that, say, the guys in the rubber pants and hairspray do, you know. Or even rap is much more popular than rock.
It's a subject that's very close to your heart and you feel quite passionate about it.
Well, I've lived my whole life around it. You know.
Yeah. So what you're actually talking about is your life.
Yeah, more than half of my life anyway. I mean, that's all I've done since I was 14. I'm 38 now. I don't want to sound like some old shit going, oh, the young stuff isn't any good.
Yeah. Okay.
But, you know.